Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we dive into tales of love, betrayal, resilience, and triumph that stir the soul. Today, we'll unravel the gripping story of Emma, a single mother of triplets who faced heartbreak and abandonment but rose above it all to rewrite her destiny. Stay tuned for a tale of redemption and strength. The sterile, whitewashed walls of the hospital room felt like they were closing in on Emma Turner as she lay on the bed, gripped by waves of pain. The contractions came like relentless tidal surges, each one stealing her breath and sending tremors through her body. But amidst the agony, a small ember of hope burned in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would meet her sons. 3 tiny lives, brimming with promise, were about to enter the world. Yet, Emma had no inkling of the devastation that would accompany their arrival. Her heart pounded erratically, sweat coated her forehead, and her trembling hands gripped the bed's railing. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional storm brewing in the room. Standing near the foot of the bed was Ethan Daniels, the man Emma had trusted with her future. His chiseled features, which once exuded warmth and charm, now held a cold indifference that sent shivers down her spine. She searched his eyes for reassurance, but the man she once loved was gone. "Ethan," Emma gasped, her voice fragile from exhaustion and fear. "What's wrong?" Ethan adjusted the silk tie around his neck, a gesture that felt unnervingly detached given the circumstances. His lips pressed into a thin line as he spoke. "I can't stay, Emma," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This isn't going to work." For a moment, Emma thought she had misheard him. Her mind, clouded by pain and exhaustion, struggled to process his words. "Well, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice tinged with desperation. Ethan took a measured step back, distancing himself from the bed and from her. His next words hit like a thunderclap. "My father gave me an ultimatum. If I stay with you, I lose everything, my inheritance, my position in the company, everything I've worked for. I'm not going to throw my future away for this." The room seemed to tilt as Emma's world crumbled. She stared at him, disbelief etched on her face. "You're leaving? Now? While I'm in labor?" Her voice cracked, tears pooling in her eyes. "Ethan, these are your sons. How can you do this to us?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't falter. "It's not about them," he said coldly. "It's about survival. You'll be fine. You're strong, Emma, but I can't risk my future. My father won't allow it." Emma felt a scream rising in her throat, but another contraction silenced it, forcing her body to focus on the task at hand. She doubled over, clutching her belly, tears streaming down her face as Ethan watched without a hint of compassion. When the contraction subsided, she looked up at him, her voice a trembling whisper. "You're making a choice you'll regret for the rest of your life." Ethan shrugged, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket and tossing it onto the bed. "There's money in there. It should help for a while," he said matter-of-factly. "Goodbye, Emma." Without another glance, he turned and walked out the door. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into silence. Emma lay there, shattered. As the realization sank in, she was alone. The man who had promised her a future, who had whispered dreams of a family and forever, had abandoned her in her most vulnerable moment. But amidst the heartache, something shifted inside Emma. It was subtle at first, a flicker of resolve that grew stronger with each beat of her aching heart. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her sons. The betrayal was a knife to her soul, but it wouldn't define her. She would rise for her boys, Liam, Noah, and Mason. She would show them a strength they could carry into their own lives. "All right, Emma," one of the nurses said gently, breaking through her haze. "It's time. We need you to push." Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Emma bore down, her focus shifting entirely to the task at hand. The pain was excruciating, but she channeled her heartbreak into determination. She pushed through the agony, through the tears, and through the shadows of abandonment. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the first cry pierced the air, followed by another and another. 3 tiny, perfect boys were placed in her arms. their dark eyes gazing up at her with innocent wonder. They didn't know what had just happened. They didn't know the man who had walked out on them. All they knew was the warmth of their mother's embrace. "You're here," Emma whispered, her tears falling freely as she kissed each of their tiny foreheads. "You're safe, and it's us against the world now." Meanwhile, across the country in a towering office building in New York City, Ethan Daniels sat at a mahogany conference table opposite his father, Charles Daniels. The older man's steely eyes bore into Ethan, a mixture of pride and expectation etched into his lined face. "Did you handle it?" Charles asked, his tone as sharp as the tailored suit he wore. Ethan nodded curtly. "Yes, it's over." Charles's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Good. You made the right decision. Family legacy comes first. Emotions are a weakness we can't afford. Now, focus on the Daniels name. Build your future." Ethan nodded again, but a pang of something, regret, perhaps flickered in his chest. He quickly shoved it aside. This was the life he had chosen. Sacrifices had to be made, no matter the cost. Back in Denver, Emma cradled her newborn sons, her exhaustion mingling with a fierce determination. The envelope Ethan had left remained untouched. She didn't need his money. She didn't need him. What she needed was a plan, a way to build a life for her boys. A life free from the shadow of Ethan Daniels. The city lights outside her hospital window twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her heart. She didn't know how she was going to do it, but she knew one thing for certain. She would make it. For Liam, for Noah, for Mason. They were her purpose now, and nothing would stand in her way. 5 years had passed since that cold winter night when Ethan had walked out of Emma's life. 5 years since the pain of betrayal had torn through her, leaving her to pick up the pieces and rebuild. It hadn't been easy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but Emma had done it. She had raised her 3 boys, Liam, Noah, and Mason, with a love and determination that burned brighter than any obstacle life had thrown their way. The apartment in Portland that Emma had turned into a home was modest, yet it was hers. The walls, once bare and empty, now held pictures of her sons and the little milestones they had reached together. Each corner of the apartment told a story of laughter, of struggle, and of perseverance. Emma had made sure her children never felt the void left by their father. Instead, she surrounded them with affection and purpose. She had found strength in her sons' smiles, in their curious minds, and in their boundless energy. One morning, as the sun peeked through the curtains, Emma found herself lost in thought while she prepared breakfast. The smell of sizzling bacon filled the air, and the sound of her sons' voices echoed from the living room as they played. She stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, when Liam burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, I made a drawing," Liam announced, holding up his latest creation, a colorful crayon drawing of a house and a dog. Emma smiled as she turned to him, taking the picture into her hands. "It's beautiful. Liam, you're so talented," she said, planting a kiss on his forehead. As she turned to set the drawing aside, Noah came running in, holding a toy truck and making engine noises. From. "Mom, I'm a race car driver." Emma laughed, kneeling down to ruffle his hair. "You're going to be the fastest race car driver in the world." "Noah," she said, her heart swelling with pride. And then came Mason, the quietest of the 3, walking into the room with a book in hand. He looked up at her with those big brown eyes that always seemed to carry a deep thought behind them. "Mom, can we read this together?" he asked softly, his voice full of the purest sincerity. "Of course, sweetheart. Just give me a moment, and we'll read it together," Emma promised, her voice warm and reassuring. As the boys continued to chatter excitedly, Emma couldn't help but reflect on how much they had grown. Her little boys, now 5 years old, were thriving despite the challenges they had faced. They were her everything, the reason she had pushed herself beyond what she thought was possible. And as their laughter filled the small apartment, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. But it wasn't just the boys who kept her moving forward. Emma had dreams of her own, dreams for a better future, not just for her sons, but for herself. Dreams that stretched beyond the walls of their modest apartment. Dreams that stretched beyond the daily grind of working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Emma had worked tirelessly over the years, taking online business courses at night while juggling her responsibilities as a mother. And now, she was ready to take a leap. She was ready to start her own event planning business. She had saved enough money, and with the knowledge she had gained from her studies, Emma felt confident that now was the time to take her passion and turn it into something real. As she dropped the boys off at preschool one morning, her heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was walking into the unknown, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally in control of her future. Back at home, Emma sat down at her desk. The idea for her business, Ellie Events, had been taking shape for months. She had a vision for creating luxurious, memorable events with a focus on sustainability. And the more she worked on it, the more it felt like the perfect fit for her. Emma wanted to create events that had a purpose, that made a difference. She wanted to build a legacy that would not only provide for her sons, but would leave a mark on the world. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from Chloe, her best friend, who had been there for her every step of the way. "How's the business idea going? I'm so excited for you. You're going to do great things." Emma smiled and quickly typed a response. "I'm ready. It's time. I'm going to make it happen." Chloe's optimism always gave Emma that extra push, and she had been a constant source of encouragement. For years, Chloe had believed in her when she couldn't quite believe in herself. And now, Emma was finally ready to take the leap. She was going to start her own business, and no one, not even Ethan, could take that away from her. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Emma spent late nights working on her website, designing event packages, and reaching out to potential clients. It was overwhelming, but it was exactly what she wanted. Every new connection, every step forward, felt like a victory, even though she was still working 2 jobs and raising her 3 sons. She had never felt more alive, more driven. But the weight of her ambitions didn't come without sacrifices. Some nights, she would fall into bed, exhausted, only to be woken up at the crack of dawn to start all over again. It wasn't easy, but Emma had never been afraid of hard work. She had come so far, and she wouldn't stop now. One afternoon, as she was picking the boys up from preschool, Emma's phone buzzed again. She glanced down at it, heart racing. It was a call from a potential investor, someone who had heard about Ellie Events and was interested in meeting. Emma had worked so hard for this moment. It was happening. As the boys ran to her, eager to tell her about their day, Emma quickly slid the phone back into her pocket. This was her moment, and nothing at all was going to hold her back. The next day, Emma stood in front of her small office, hands trembling with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had secured a meeting with Maxwell Cooper, a prominent investor known for backing promising startups. This was her chance, her moment to prove that Ellie Events could be more than just a dream. Her office, located in the heart of Portland, was small but full of potential. It was a cozy space, with inspiration boards on the walls, samples of event decorations on display, and a desk cluttered with paperwork. As Emma sipped her coffee, she looked around, realizing how far she had come. Only a few years ago, this space had seemed impossible. But now, it was her reality. The phone rang, pulling her back into the present. She answered quickly, trying to steady her breath. "Hello, this is Emma Carter," she said, her voice just a bit shaky. "Ms. Carter, this is Maxwell Cooper." The voice on the other end said smoothly, "I'm calling to confirm our meeting for this afternoon. I'm excited to learn more about your business." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, of course," Emma said, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I'm looking forward to it." As the call ended, she double-checked her notes, ensuring that everything was perfect. She had worked for this moment, sacrificing sleep, spending nights researching the industry, and making countless decisions to get to this point. And now, everything was riding on this one meeting. By the time Emma arrived at the restaurant where they were meeting, she could hardly contain her excitement. The restaurant was a sleek, upscale place with polished wood floors and soft lighting. creating an atmosphere of sophistication and comfort. She spotted Maxwell immediately tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of confidence. He was seated at a corner table, waiting for her. "Ms. Carter, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, rising to shake her hand. Emma smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you for meeting with me. I've been working hard to grow my company, and I'm excited to share my vision with you." They sat down, and as Emma began discussing her plans for expanding Ellie events, she could see the interest in Maxwell's eyes. She spoke passionately about combining luxury with sustainability, creating events that not only made an impact, but left people with lasting memories. Maxwell listened intently, nodding along. He seemed impressed by her vision. "This is exactly what the industry needs," Maxwell said after a pause, his voice thoughtful. "Your ideas are fresh, but grounded in reality. I can see this growing into something very successful. I'd like to invest in your company." Emma's heart soared. This was it. The moment she had worked for, dreamed of, had finally arrived. Before she could respond, the door to the restaurant opened, and a figure walked in. Emma froze, her blood running cold. It was Ethan, the man who had walked away from her 5 years ago. His eyes met hers across the room, and his face, once familiar, once beloved, was now filled with something she couldn't place. Regret? Guilt? She wasn't sure. Maxwell noticed the tension in the air. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice concerned. Emma quickly forced a smile, trying to mask the shock and confusion that gripped her. "Yes, everything is fine. Just someone from my past." She turned back to Maxwell, though her gaze kept returning to Ethan. What was he doing here? As Ethan walked toward their table, Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone in this moment. He had left her without a word all those years ago. And now, here he was, standing in front of her, like nothing had changed. "Olivia," Ethan said quietly, his voice hesitant. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Maxwell, this is Ethan. We have a history," Emma said, her voice tight. She turned to Ethan, her emotions a swirl of anger and confusion. "What are you doing here?" "Ethan?" Ethan's expression softened, his eyes reflecting a deep sorrow. "I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't expect to run into you." Maxwell, ever the professional, stood up and extended his hand to Ethan. "I don't believe we've met." "Maxwell Cooper," he said, giving Ethan a polite, though slightly awkward, handshake. "Ethan Montgomery," Ethan replied, his voice still carrying the weight of unspoken history. "It's good to meet you." Emma could feel the tension in the air as she sat silently. Ethan and Maxwell exchanged pleasantries, but Emma couldn't help but feel like a storm was brewing. She had moved on from Ethan, built a life without him. But now that he was here, it was as though all the old wounds had reopened. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and yet his presence seemed to threaten everything she had built. Maxwell turned to Emma, sensing the change in the atmosphere. "Since you two know each other, why don't you join us?" "Ethan," he suggested with a smile. "It seems we're in the middle of an important discussion." Ethan hesitated, but then nodded. "Sure, if it's no trouble." Emma forced herself to focus on the meeting, pushing her emotions aside. She had come too far to let this moment derail everything. As she continued to discuss the details of the investment with Maxwell, her eyes couldn't help but flicker toward Ethan. She saw the way he watched her, an unreadable expression on his face, as though he was trying to understand the woman she had become. The meeting went on, but Emma's thoughts were scattered. Every time she glanced at Ethan, the memories flooded back, the promises, the betrayals, the love that had once been so real. And yet, she had managed to move on. She had created a future without him. She had done it on her own, and she was proud of it. As the meeting came to a close, Maxwell stood and shook Emma's hand. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Emma. We'll be in touch soon." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of relief. She had handled herself well, despite everything. As Maxwell left, Ethan stood up, his voice soft. "Olivia, can we talk? Just the two of us." Emma hesitated, her heart conflicted. She had moved on, built a life without him, but part of her still wanted answers. Part of her still wanted to understand why he had left her, why he had abandoned her in the darkest moment of her life. Fine, Emma said, her voice calm but firm. We can talk. They walked to a nearby cafe, the sound of clinking cups and quiet conversation surrounding them. They sat at a small table, the air thick with unspoken words. Ethan's face was filled with regret, his eyes avoiding hers as he fidgeted with his coffee cup. Emma, on the other hand, felt an uneasy calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what she wanted from this conversation. She wasn't even sure what she could forgive. Finally, Ethan spoke. Olivia, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hurt you, and I hurt our children. But there's something you need to know. Emma's heart raced. She had lived with the pain of his abandonment for years. But now, in this moment, she wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't the man you thought I was. Ethan continued, his voice shaky. I left because I thought it was the best thing for all of us. But I was wrong. I was scared. I didn't know how to face what I was going through. And I made the worst decision of my life. Emma's chest tightened, her emotions a whirlwind. She had spent so many years thinking that he had chosen his family's wealth over her, that he didn't care about their future. But now, hearing him speak, she could feel something shifting inside her. There was more to the story. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to hear it all. I wasn't just running from you, Ethan continued. I was running from myself. But seeing you here today, seeing what you've built, I realize how much I've missed. I made a mistake, Olivia, and I'm sorry. The air between them was thick, but something had changed. Emma wasn't sure what to do with the emotions rising in her. But she knew that, for the first time in years, she had heard the truth. And that truth, however painful, was the key to finally moving forward. As they sat in silence, Emma felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. The past couldn't be changed. But perhaps, just perhaps, she was ready to let it go. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. But we've both changed, and we're moving forward. With that, Emma stood, ready to embrace the future, no matter how uncertain it was. As she stepped out into the city, her heart was lighter than it had been in years. She had fought for this life, and no one, not even Ethan, could take it away. The past was behind her. The future was all hers. Thank you for watching this incredible journey of perseverance and forgiveness. Emma's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to rebuild and find happiness. If her story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more powerful narratives. Share your thoughts or where you're watching from in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and keep believing in second chances.